Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we're talking about another big and bad trend in the Democratic Party, specifically coming from New York State. Today we're talking about threats of violence. This has been happening with Democrats for a long time. They've torn down a lot of places in New York already. The city there, New York City, is in shambles, and there's a very good reason for that. It's because, first of all, it's a Democratic stronghold. Lots of liberals there, very angry about things. They have terrible lives, apparently. They're not happy people. So they're ruining their own city because of that and trying to blame it on Trump. And this is probably because they have bad role models too. The role models in New York are not very good right now. They've got the mayor de Blasio, who is just awful. He's run the city into the ground. He's failed at every single corner. And in addition, above him is the governor of the whole state itself. Andrew Cuomo has been setting a rather bad example, if you ask me. And that's what today's story is going to focus on. We're going to talk about Andrew Cuomo, who has been having lots of controversies this last week. In fact, throughout this whole year, he's been under fire because basically he handled the pandemic pretty much in the worst way possible. Now, I try and tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. I know Trump gets accused of making the pandemic worse in a lot of ways. People try to blame him for this stuff, but really it comes down to more local politics. Trump is the leader of 50 states who each have their own leader, and underneath them, all the cities have their own leaders too. So a lot of this stuff is localized. Trump can only do so much from the federal government. And when you get down to the state level, bad things happen, like with Andrew Cuomo, who famously sent a lot of infected people back to nursing homes. This caused the nursing homes all to catch the virus. And then many people died in New York. This is probably the worst case of the virus in the whole world right now, not even just the country. Like, New York State has had one of the worst responses throughout the whole world. And that's why everyone's trying to blame Andrew Cuomo, but he's trying to dodge it, really. He's not really taking any blame. He's not taking responsibility. I mean, a more humble person would have resigned by now and let someone else try and take over, because he's really failed really bad. But instead of doing that, he's like doubling down. I think I heard he's writing a book about this too, which is really weird since he did such a bad job. And then he wants to write a book about his bad job. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be interesting. That's a funny choice, but it's not really the worst thing. Actually, what we're talking about today comes from this tweet. Donald Trump Jr. has a good point. He says, another Joe Biden voter threatening violence. This is now the norm in the Democrat Party. Very, very true. And as you can see by the thing he's quote tweeting here, Governor Cuomo says Trump better have an army to protect him if he comes to New York City. Now, this is a funny way to say things for sure. And right out the gate, the first thing I'll say is Trump does have an army to protect him. He's the president. He has the Secret Service and the United States military all backing him up. So he literally does have this, first of all. And second of all, I mean, what are you implying here? That Trump goes to New York City, he's going to get hurt? Like, that's basically a threat of violence. This is saying you're not going to be safe in a major American city. Like, the leader of the country can't go to a major city. That not only that, but Trump is from New York City. He's lived there like most of his life, like many decades. He was a major developer and leader there. He's the guy who famously rebuilt the rink at Central Park. He did things like that for the city. He was a famous figure, like beloved character from New York, like a very big socialite back in his younger days, stuff like that. So to say that he can't go to New York without fearing for his life is very interesting. And it's also not surprising, actually. I mean, it's bad. It's coming from a leader, a governor of the New York State, like one of our biggest states. And, you know, it's just not the first time we've heard it, because this actually reminds me of the Biden quote we covered like a week ago, where Biden said, do you really think America will be more safe under Trump? Do you really think this violence is going to stop Trump wins re-election? Like, Biden said that, I'm paraphrasing, but basically Biden said more violence will come if you don't elect Biden. Like, if Trump wins, there's going to be more violence. And it's a threat. It's coming from the leader of the Democrats right now. Like, Biden is at the top. He's their candidate for president. And there's no surprise then why some of his other underlings, like Cuomo here, they're going to repeat that and just use violence. This is the Democratic way of life now. This is all they're about. They've destroyed cities like Portland and had riots all over the country. Like, they're emboldened. They're not being properly punished. They're not being shut down. They're not being voted out quickly enough. I mean, it's hard to get things done that quick. These elections happen every 2 years or whichever, you know, depending on the office. So it's not like you can vote them out immediately, but there should be some recourse. There should be some backlash, because Democrats are definitely getting unhinged and crazy. So with that said, let's get more details in this New York Post article, and then we'll go from there. So the article starts off saying this: New York Governor Cuomo on Wednesday all but threatened President Trump's safety if he returns to New York City in a rant responding to an exclusive story by the Post that Trump is looking to pull federal funds from lawless cities, including New York. Cuomo called an emergency press briefing within a half hour on Wednesday night to tear into Trump for the order, which cites New York's rising murder rate and defunding of the NYPD. Yeah, it's not looking good in New York right now. They could use some help. They could use a visit from the current sitting president. So I don't know why they're not welcoming him with open arms. If I was in New York right now, I'd be like, hey, get rid of Cuomo, get rid of de Blasio. Let's bring Trump back and get some law and order here. Let's get some new leaders or something. Can't they resign or like vote them out? Like we could have a recall election or something. He better have an army if he thinks he's going to walk down the street in New York. New Yorkers don't want to have anything to do with him, the Democrats said, all but threatening the commander-in-chief. But Cuomo, who like Trump hails from Queens, wasn't done. He can't have enough bodyguards to walk through New York City. People don't want to have anything to do with him. Now, I'm not sure how he thinks he speaks for New York City now. I guess because he's elected as the governor. I mean, that makes somewhat sense. But I mean, there's definitely conservatives in New York. They're not all 100% Democrat. And even some of the Democrats still like Trump. Like I said, he's a legendary figure. He hasn't done anything wrong. The Democrats think that because they hate someone, like everyone hates someone, but it's just not really the case. On substance, Cuomo said he doubted the legality of Trump's 5-page memo ordering a review of federal funds that can be redirected from New York City, Portland, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. It is more of the same from him. It's political, it's gratuitous, and it's illegal. But it's another attempt to kill New York City, Cuomo said. President Ford said, drop dead. President Trump has been already actively trying to kill New York City since he's been elected, he said. Okay, I'm not sure where the President Ford part comes from, but I think Trump is not trying to kill New York. He's trying to, take away and punish a city that's not being done properly. These cities are rioting and destroying themselves, and they're not letting the people clean up. They're, handicapping the police and the firefighters and the people who could help stop this problem. So Trump is just saying, if you're not going to do your jobs, you're not going to get federal funding. Like, you don't have a right to this extra funding. I mean, the city should get tax dollars, but they can have their own fundraisers and stuff too. And especially if they're going to be like this and act this bad and not run the city right. There obviously is some corruption there. And it very well could be them corruptly taking that money and not putting it in the right places, taking it for themselves or something. In highly personal and insulting language, Cuomo speculated that Trump wasn't upset about New York's soaring murder rate and shootings. I think it's because he's from New York City and New York City rejected him always. Cuomo said he was dismissed as a clown in New York City. Those who know him best like him least. Cuomo jeered. He was disrespected in New York City. Nobody took him seriously, and he was just a tabloid cartoon. Referring to a claim in a recent book by Trump's niece, Mary Trump, Cuomo said his sister, a former federal judge, is disgraced by him. Now, these are just baseless claims. He's referring to that stupid Mary Trump book that we talked about. That was like one of his distant relatives trying to make a buck, trying to sell a book and get an advance and, make some money. And it doesn't reflect his actual family. His close, immediate family loves Trump. And that book was mostly made up of fabrications and exaggerations. And really, this Mary Trump lady barely even knew him, met him a few brief times. And that's why she wrote this book, so Democrats could latch onto it and then try to act like he's bad or something. But really, Cuomo is just kind of seeming like he's bitter, like butthurt. He wants to go after Trump, and he's just mad that he failed his city and state. Cuomo is the one that's really to blame for these problems. Like, his place has high rising rates of crime, corruption. The virus is taking over lots of people. It's very, very sad and tragic there. So to see him lash out at Trump is just him trying to divert the blame and try to also virtue signal to the Democrats saying, hey, look, I hate Trump more than you do. Vote for me. Keep me in office. The governor also claimed Trump's negligence is the reason New York State suffered the highest COVID death toll. The governor's critics blame his health department's mandate that forbade nursing homes from turning away COVID positive patients, potentially leading to at least 6,500 deaths. At the end of his call, Cuomo, apparently sensing how his remarks about Trump could be seen as threatening, attempt to walk them back. So even he knew he was going a bit too far and basically issuing threats to the president. That's illegal. and could get him into real trouble, actually. And then in addition, he's blaming his failure with the pandemic on Trump. Everything Democrats don't like, they blame on Trump. It's totally insane. It's totally inspired by their Trump derangement syndrome. And it just goes to show that they can't offer solutions. They can't admit they're wrong. They can't fix things. These guys are a failed party. Andrew Cuomo has ruined his state, and he's trying to ruin more places. He's trying to get everyone in on this bad Democratic plan. And it's not good. It's bad. It's a terrible Democratic trend. I don't know what the party's going to do. The liberals have totally failed their base, the country, and the world. I mean, they're just so baffled by Trump. There's so much suffering from Trump derangement syndrome that they're just lashing out. They're being violent. They're destroying things. They're blaming all their problems on Trump. So they're getting worse since they won't be culpable, since they're not taking responsibility. They'll never get better. And that's why Cuomo and all these other leaders are totally falling apart. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Tell me what you think about Cuomo, these threats from violence coming from Democrats, and tell me what you think about the state of New York. Is it really Trump's fault that things have gone wrong there, or is it the leaders who are actually doing the things and making things happen? I don't know how Trump is involved really, but they claim he is. So tell me what you think. Also hit the like button and subscribe if you're new too. Thanks for your time, and now have a great day.